Okay, colleagues, if you could take your seats, we're ready to start. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the wonderful, sunny borough of Wigan for this meeting of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We have apologies this morning from Rishi Shorey, Eamon O'Brien attending in Rishi's place. Apologies too from Jean Stretton and indeed all of the Oldham delegation. That's because it's my sorry duty to have to inform the CA of the passing of Sue Dearden, Councillor Sue Dearden. It's Sue's funeral today, and obviously I think on behalf of all of the CA want to send our condolences to Sue's family and friends and say we're thinking at them at this time, as I'm sure we all would want to do to the Lord Mayor of Manchester, Councillor Eddie Newton, who who lost his wife Sheila again in very shock circumstances. Again, I'm sure the whole CA would want to join me in sending our love and our sympathy to Eddie and his family at this that's what is a very difficult time, and say we're all thinking of them. So moving on into the agenda, no announcements or urgent business this morning. Item 3, declarations of interest, if they can be declared in the normal way. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on January 26 and the special meeting held earlier this week. Are they approved? Thank you. Item 5, Gmca overview and scrutiny committee minutes. They are for noting. That's the economy, business, growth and skills, housing planning and environment, corporate issues and reform. Are they noted? Thank you, colleagues. Item 6 has been withdrawn. Item 7, Greater Manchester housing deal. Could I ask Paul Dennett to introduce the update on the proposed deal with the government? Paul.
Thank you, Mayor Burnham. Yes, so colleagues will be aware that we've been having ongoing conversations with government around establishing a housing deal for Greater Manchester, and those discussions are ongoing. The purpose of the report really is just to seek permission from the Combined Authority to agree a deal with government, if necessary, ahead of the next Combined Authority. And the reason for that is because we've had indication, in a sense, from government that there is an urgency on their part to agree a deal as soon as possible. Members of the Combined Authority will know that this is around additional flexible capital and revenue to obviously strengthen our collective delivery capacity within Greater Manchester and also strengthen the delivery of developable sites across the city region. I just want to draw members' attention to the recommendation, because we do need to amend the recommendation slightly to include both yourself, Mayor Burnham, as one of the delegations, and also the Chief Executive of Rochdale, Steve Rumbelow, who is the portfolio holder in supporting me with regards to housing planning and homelessness. So the recommendation is to agree a deal, if necessary, before the next Combined Authority with government on a housing deal for Greater Manchester, with those amendments to the recommendations made.
Thank you very much, Paul. Any colleagues want to come in on this item? Could I just add that it would seem the government is keen to conclude a deal in the next few weeks, or certainly the impression that we've received. But I would want to say that this, of course, has to be the right deal for Greater Manchester, rather than necessarily a hastily concluded deal. Getting this right is crucial to getting the spatial framework right when we come to consider that again in the middle part of this year. So I would just want to commend City Mayor of Salford for the work that's been done to put us in a position where we may be able to conclude a deal with the government. But obviously it has to come with the relevant capital that we need to deliver on any targets that the government give us in relation to a deal. You know, we put in a substantial bid for around £200 million of capital, and that remains our position. And if we are to receive anything different, then you know we have to work from that position and conclude a deal on that basis. So I think the CA is giving authority today to delegate in the way that's been asked. But I think it is obviously crucial that if a deal is to be struck before the next meeting of the CA, it does have to be the right deal for Greater Manchester that gives us the funding we need to deliver the much needed housing growth that I think we and the government agree on. If there's no further comment on that, we'll take that as agreed and move on to item 8, Greater Manchester growth deal, Wigan A49 Link Road, request for full funding and approval. This is asking members of the CA to grant the remaining £9.226 million out of a total of £10.295 million for the delivery of this scheme. And coincidentally, we're meeting here in Wigan today as this item is on the agenda. I want to stress to colleagues that by hosting a meeting of the CA, you don't automatically get a £10 million road investment, so no one should take that as a precedent. But as also a former parliamentary representative from this borough, I can vouch for the fact that it needs better west to east connectivity across the borough to improve journey times and therefore productivity. And I know myself of the strategic importance of this particular scheme, and I know that Wigan MBC has had long ambitions to improve connectivity, and this will go some considerable way towards it, as well as obviously opening up new planning and housing potential. Anybody want to come in on this? Peter?
Yes, thanks. We certainly appreciate the support from this particular plan, which has been going on for quite some time. But it's just appropriate. We're actually in Wigan when you approve it. We did have plans to lock the doors to not let you out in case you didn't agree it, but obviously that's not necessary now. So thanks for that. And obviously in a couple of years' time, it'll be a lot easier to get into Wigan Town Hall with this improved road system.
Thank you very much, Peter. I take it that this application is agreed. Thank you very much. Item 9, Brexit monthly update. Sir Richard Lees.
Thanks, Chair. I was just earlier today looking at the picture of the Cabinet sat around the table at Chequers, apparently coming to an agreement, although when you start reading the subtext, it again appears to be an agreement to try and fudge things as long as possible before actually having to come to an agreement. So I think there has to be an ongoing concern about how negotiations are going at a national level, particularly as time increasingly runs out before we get to a transition period. Out of this paper, I'll just highlight a couple of the paragraphs. One is paragraph 2.4, which is based on the elite government Brexit impact assessments, which shows that the northwest of England will be one of the worst hit regions in the country from all Brexit scenarios, with a cutting growth of at the soft end 2.5 percentage points, at the hard Brexit end as much as 12 percentage points. Clearly the northwest economy isn't an exact match with the Greater Manchester economy, and one of the pieces of work that's being done and will be done over the next couple of weeks is to do an analysis of what the impact would be for Greater Manchester itself. But I'd be surprised if it's quite as negative, but I'd also be surprised if it came out positive as well. Coupled with that is what is contained within 2.2 and the reference to the IMF's forecasts. And yet again, putting on the table the need to rebalance the economy outside of the South East. Clearly, if you put those two paragraphs together, that it's North West, one of the worst hit areas, North East, West Midlands and Northern Ireland and so on, really does restate that case for the rebalancing of the economy. And one of the places that could start immediately is with skills, and some of the investment that's needed, investment in housing, investment in transport, is not quick fix. Skills, we could do something instantly. We are potentially facing labour shortages arising out of reduced international migration, skill shortages out of that, that in order to address that to the extent that we can, the investment in skills and improved productivity needs to be happening now, not waiting until a deal is either done or not done. And clearly we're in the middle of formulating our local industrial strategy. We've made the case for devolution of skills funding, not just adult skills, the whole of skills funding for very many years, supported very much by our private sector partners. And I think within the Brexit context, we need to be restating the case for that very, very strongly. So it shouldn't be waiting until next March for when we might have an approved local industrial strategy. That's something that ought to happen as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any colleagues want to come in on this item? What I would just want to say, in addition to what Richard said, would be how, if reports are to be believed from what was discussed at Chequers yesterday, this is now entering a much more serious phase where decisions on the shape of any future deal are beginning to be taken. It's completely unacceptable to me, and I hope to all of you as well, that Greater Manchester doesn't still at this stage have a seat at a permanent seat at any body which is discussing the implications of the various deal scenarios. The Mayor of London meets the Brexit Secretary once a month, I'm told. The devolved administrations in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have a permanent committee. Overseas territories are represented. It cannot be right that the English regions have no permanent voice in this process, given that difficult trade-offs may be made between different sectors of the economy as we get into the final deal. And I think as a CA we should begin to make it absolutely clear now that this situation can't continue. This is too important to our economy. The government can't be asking us to develop a local industrial strategy on the one hand and then be shutting us out of Brexit negotiations on the other. We need to be in these discussions now, and I just need to report to the CA that in my only meeting with the Brexit Secretary, I asked whether there was a regional analysis of what various Brexit scenarios might mean for the northwest of the Greater Manchester economy, and was assured that that work had not been carried out, only to see something that very much looked like that work leaked to the media just a couple of weeks ago. This isn't good enough. It's not to make a political point. This is about the future of our region, the livelihoods of the people who live here. We deserve a lot better than this when it comes to our involvement in these discussions. And I think, building on what Richard has just said, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority now needs to make that position very clear to the government. Richard.
Just one thing that I did omit that does give us an opportunity. The Brexit Select Committee are meeting in Manchester on March the 19th, and we will be making a submission to that meeting.
Thank you. To do just that. Okay, thank you, Richard. Moving on to item 10, the Greater Manchester Age-Friendly Hub strategy, which has been circulated. Had Jean Stretton been here, she would have been presenting this strategy to you today. But in Jean's absence, I would just want to put on record my appreciation of all of the work that she's done to develop what I believe is an excellent document, and something which puts Greater Manchester at the forefront of thinking around active ageing and changing the whole discussion about the ageing society. As I've said before, banishing phrases like bed blockers, which I think are disrespectful to older people and suggest that they're the problem, when in fact it's our problem in that we don't have systems and services that properly support older people and help them live the life that they want to live. And that's the way that we're coming at this, with a very positive view of the potential of older people to continue to contribute to their communities. And that's the philosophy, if you like, that runs through this strategy. It is an ambitious strategy. There is no doubt about that. But it needs to be, because Greater Manchester, as we know, has the most extensive devolution deal of any part of the country. We have the ability, uniquely, to break down those silos between the different public services and ask those services to work as one team to support older people and to help them live their life as they want to. You will see the measures set out at the heart of this strategy. Let me just take you through a few of them. The first is to establish age-friendly communities across Greater Manchester, promoting volunteering and bringing the generations together. It's, again, probably very fitting that we're meeting in this borough today, given that Wigan MBC has 8 dementia-friendly communities across the borough, where some of this thinking is very much being brought through, not just in terms of the way public services are operating, but actually working with the voluntary and the community sector in a very different way through the principles of the Wigan deal to provide that informal, ongoing support to older people in their communities. We also have examples in Manchester through the Ageing Hub, particularly Levenshume, where a huge amount of work went into looking at what simple changes could be made to support older people, such as local businesses displaying a sign to say that they were prepared to have their facilities and their toilets used by older people when they were out and about. That's what it means to me to have age-friendly communities, where public, private, voluntary community sectors all pull together and play their part. And I think Greater Manchester is well placed to be at the forefront of these societal changes that need to happen. The second is an age-friendly health and social care system. We are already further forward than any other part of the country when it comes to health and care integration, and we continue to talk to the government about how we might develop our thinking. For me, that is about having one team around the older person, covering their physical, mental, and their social needs. In this 70th anniversary year of the creation of the NHS, Greater Manchester is uniquely well placed to put forward a new vision for a 21st century NHS, not as a treatment system that sees the hospital as the default setting for care, a medical model, but much more a health promotion model, a person-centred approach that's all about supporting people in their own home. And that will be the defining character of the NHS which we seek to build in Greater Manchester, an integrated NHS, a public NHS, but very much based around the person, supporting them in their own home. Item 3, increased housing choice to promote social connections and well-being in later life. Well, Paul Dennett's just briefed us on the housing deal, and if we can conclude a successful housing deal with the government, that may well give us that capacity to rethink how we provide better housing for older people in our communities, and actually through the town centre challenge perhaps think about more supported living for older people within our town centres, closer perhaps to where they want to be. And I think this link between health and housing is one that we need to develop as we go forward. Going through the other items, a transport network that supports older people. We've made it clear that we wish to pursue bus reform in Greater Manchester, and I think we need a bus system that very much starts with the needs of all of the public, particularly older people, where we have easy access to our buses through ramps, where we have audio-visual announcements on all of our buses. Again, for me, that is what an age-friendly Greater Manchester means if people are asking us to define that phrase. The strategy talks about becoming a world leader in research and innovation. Well, our universities are already doing pioneering work in this area. The University of Salford has an institute for dementia, which again is doing great work, not just in the treatment, but how we support people to live well with dementia. And we should be very proud of what Salford and indeed the other 3 universities are doing in this space. I've talked about the way we change the language around ageing, and I think that is implicit in everything that we are doing. And if we look towards the end, we talk about sport and culture. Lord Peter Smith has been very clear that increasing rates of physical activity need to be at the heart of our plans for improving public health in Greater Manchester, and that just isn't about the younger generation or indeed those in their middle years. It's about increasing physical activity rates amongst older people as well. And I'm very keen to see the development of a social prescribing system that might signpost people towards walking groups within their community so that older people can get out and about, be active, but also enjoy company, and we can tackle loneliness and social isolation as well. So what you have here is a very comprehensive strategy covering all areas of Greater Manchester life. It finishes on culture. We've just agreed new funding for our cultural organisations, and I know that they will want to play a full part in this agenda too. So it is ambitious, but I think it needs to be. You know, we haven't yet, as a UK society, come up with good answers to the challenge of the ageing society. I want Greater Manchester to be the area that begins to lead that debate. This strategy will help us do it. And the final thing to say is we have made an application to the World Health Organization for recognition as an age-friendly city region. I can update the CA today in saying that application has been accepted in terms of it being an approved application, but we still wait to hear whether or not it will be approved and whether we'll be given that status. So the application is in, it's been verified, and we hope to hear soon that we have that status, which will be unique amongst any UK city region. So I recommend the document to colleagues this morning. I'm asking you to approve the GM age-friendly strategy, but before doing so, of course, I would be more than happy to hear any comments that colleagues would wish to make. Brenda Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say very much welcome this strategy, and to say that in Tameside we are already working to many of the 12 pledges contained in there, and we see definitely the difference that this makes to our ageing population. And so the only real question that I would ask is that do we have any clarity on any potential GM funding that may come our way to support this strategy within the districts?
Thank you, Brenda. I'll come back to that if there's other people come in first. Richard. Peter, sorry.
Thanks. Not sure if I should declare an interest in this paper, Mr. I think the health elements is really important because, in a sense, it's the essence of what we're trying to do in Care 2020. Rather than wait until people become dependent upon NHS and A&E and all that stuff, we're trying to intervene earlier, support people in their own homes or in their care homes if they're into care homes, and give them a better quality of life. As you mentioned in the work that I've come across, loneliness is actually as bad for somebody's health as smoking 20 cigarettes a day. It's really an impact on people's lives. And if we can do that, and that is actually not going to be solved by the NHS or probably even directly by us, but actually it's the community themselves. They can get together and work with people to do that. So I think it's really important. The only slight caveat I've got is not that, I mean, what we're saying here is absolutely right. It's a slight confusion because I think we and a number of other authorities are actually using the term these days age well rather than age friendly, in a sense, in that progressive way of start well, live well, age well of our communities. So we needn't, you know, we don't want to start rebadging everything saying it's age friendly, but you know, the principles behind this are really important for all of us, and I'm sure we're going to support it.
Thank you, Peter. Deputy Mayor Bev Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to welcome this as well. I think it's tremendous to see Greater Manchester setting the standard internationally for an area of policy that often actually is way down on people's list of priorities. And I also really welcome the language, the values that are implicit in this. Your forward with Councillor Stretton's talks about changing the narrative and celebrating the fact that more people are living longer, and similarly the section at the end on communication and narrative rehearses that, talking about us pioneering a new and positive vision of ageing, and I think that is absolutely so important. I just wanted to say, though, I think as well as, in terms of the implications of taking that approach, as well as developing opportunities and services across all those areas as you outlined, Mr. Mayor, I think we also have to accept that as we develop the detail of how we deliver this strategy, we'll need to give considerable thought to the development of our own workforces, because I think we have to accept that sadly people working with older people don't sometimes do it in a way that reflects those values of empowerment and choice and respect for older people. So I think we've got to work through as well what it means for the various people who work in our services and the way that we expect them to relate to older people on a day-to-day basis.
Sorry if I may just come back on that. I mean, I know where Bev's coming from that, but actually we are all beginning to change. As we develop what's called asset-based working, that actually does change the thing. And we've agreed a strategy at the Greater Manchester Health Partnership Executive. We were going to have it on today's agenda, but it got pushed away for other business. But I think members want to be assured that that is working, and I'm sure we can have a future presentation of that, because it is fundamentally doing exactly what Beth says. It's actually looking at people not as problems, not as issues, but actually what can they offer, what are they offering us, and how can we get the best out of them.
Thank you, Peter. Any other colleagues? Yeah, Linda Thomas.
Yeah. Can I just make one point, that I think this strategy is excellent, and I'm sure it's happening all over Greater Manchester without people actually joining the dots. But I think it's the important thing about this strategy does have to work, because as resources are getting less and less, as the demographics are changing, and there's a lot more older people with greater needs, and I'm afraid if we don't get this bit right, the NHS becomes unsustainable, and I think it's a really serious issue that we all need to keep at the back of our minds.
Thank you, Linda. Richard.
I certainly very much want to support the paper, but I am going to be a little bit parochial as well. And just to point out that it's not surprising that Manchester would support this paper, as having been the first UK city to join the Global Age-Friendly City Network in 2010.
Leading the way, as ever. Any other colleagues like to come in? Dave Acton.
Yes, thank you, Andy. Yeah, I think it's an excellent strategy, and it's something that we coming together. I think all the different agencies coming together to deal with the issues that are within the paper. I think the fire service actually goes into something like 30,000 homes a year doing safe and well visits, and I think many of those people are elderly people, and I think how we develop those safe and well visits will be crucial and critical to how we actually provide the services for the people. I think loneliness is one of the key things, and I think Peter Smith mentioned that, and I think it's how the community comes together, I think, to try to deal with that, because it is very, difficult for people if they're out there on their own and nobody actually visits them for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the fire service does come across those people on occasions, and it's so sad when that happens. But I really do welcome the strategy.
Very much, Dave, and I do know actually that firefighters do a huge amount of that work, and just want to say how much we appreciate that. City Mayor of Salford, Paul Dennett.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I welcome the strategy, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic piece of work, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I guess my concerns are very similar to Councillor Thomas's, really. Strategies are only as good as you can resource them, and I think we're all acutely aware of what's actually happening within social care up and down the country at the moment. I know regularly my trade unions locally in the city of Salford, specifically Unison, remind me of the work that they've been doing on their ethical care charter and how employment standards, if you like, within the care industry have been diluted over many, many years. We're now at a situation where care workers aren't really valued within the workforce, which is an absolute disgrace as far as I'm concerned. Also, care workers operating on zero-hour contracts, poor pay, part-time employment, job insecurity. These are all the issues. So when we talk about tackling social isolation, I think one of the first things we need to get right is delivering quality care in the home through a workforce that we clearly value, and we demonstrate that by resourcing it adequately. I know government have committed to a green paper on social care, and I hope that employment standards sits very much at the heart of that green paper in terms of tackling some of the employment practices that are going on in our social care industry up and down this country. So I welcome the strategy. I guess for me, I just caution around the resourcing of this strategy in terms of taking it forward, and I draw specific attention to what's going on in social care up and down the country at this moment in time.
Well, thank you very much, colleagues. That's a really warm response, and I think, again, we reiterate our thanks to Jean for the work that she's done on it. One of the things I like most about the strategy is the nod to Joy Division on the front cover, because obviously this is a strategy for the Manchester generation as they get old. And at one of our meetings, there was the proposal of a hacienda care home, which I've certainly put my name down for, and I'm looking forward to that. To pick up the serious point, Linda Thomas said, around, it's not just something that's nice to do, this is a necessity to change our thinking. The figure is there at the very front. 20 years from now, 1.1 million in Greater Manchester will be over 50. That's 37% of the population. So, this is a huge change in society, and we haven't yet woken up to it and really got ready for it. And I was going to make the point that Paul Dennett's just made. The biggest threat to this strategy, I would say, is government funding of social care, or lack of funding, and that has to be corrected. But actually, I would put the challenge out to both main parties in Parliament. We need to see new thinking around a long-term sustainable strategy for the funding of social care. This cannot go on any longer. As somebody with some experience in this area, the point scoring around social care has got to stop. People have got to put serious proposals on the table because as a country we can't afford to go much further forward without a sustainable funding strategy for social care. So in some ways, Brenda, that answers your question to a degree, although as Peter Smith said, we are in discussions with the government about the Care 2020 vision that we've put forward, and if we are successful, obviously that would give us a status that does give us a exemplar status, if you like. It would carry some funding with it, but that's the terms of the discussion that we're having with the government at the moment. So there may be some extra funding, but we will obviously update the CA as that discussion develops. Peter's point about loneliness and smoking, it's really important, isn't it, that people understand the health damage of social isolation. It is huge, and it's why we need to think very differently And I certainly take on board the, we don't want to confuse people with the language age-friendly, age-well. I think we all know what we mean, and I think we want to make sure there's a consistency there. Bev Hughes' point about the workforce, which Peter picked up, is incredibly important. We know that other members of Greater Manchester Public Services, Dave Acton mentioned the fire service, are providing that low-level support. It's actually about joining it up, isn't it? If people come across somebody who needs extra help, what's the referral mechanism for a firefighter then to provide the extra support? And I think that's something that we need to work on, as well as thinking through new roles. I think there is a case for a major overhaul of domiciliary care linked to NHS workforce reform. Should we be thinking about new roles in the community where we train people to provide better standards of home care linked to the health service? And that's something we should certainly look at, as well as the right culture of valuing older people at the heart of everything that we do. It's important to say that alongside this strategy, colleagues need to remember the carers strategy that's recently been published by the Health and Social Care Partnership, which does put older people at the heart of things. The reality, I think we've all got to recognise, is they often feel like they're telling the same story to everybody they speak to in the different public services, and we mustn't pat ourselves on the back too much. We know we've got some way to go before we're providing older people and their carers with much better joined up support. But the carers strategy alongside this document, I think, also takes us further forward along that road. So with those kind of reflections back, I think, and thanking colleagues for the excellent contributions that they've just made, if I could ask the CA today to give its approval to this strategy and to work together to build the age-friendly Greater Manchester that we all want to see. Is the document approved? Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for a great discussion. Item 11, Councillor Sean Anstey, Institute of Technology update.
Thank you very much, Andy. Just on the previous paper, I'm looking forward to benefiting in many decades' time from an age-friendly Greater Manchester. But for now, on the Institute of Technology, so this paper is just an update to colleagues around the application process for an Institute of Technology for Greater Manchester. Members will be aware that we've been in discussion with DFE for some time around the prototype as to what this would mean for the city region. Particularly important if we reflect on the Brexit paper that was presented earlier on in this meeting, that in order to prepare Greater Manchester to be resilient to any changes that happen as a result of Brexit, that we have a skilled population, in particular at level 4 and 5 qualifications, where there is a gap across Greater Manchester. So Institutes of Technology are part of DFE's £170 million capital fund. It's expected to be 10 to 15 IoTs across the country. From a Greater Manchester perspective, we've been working obviously as a combined authority, but also with the local enterprise partnership to make sure that we build a proposal that will be complementary to the existing further and higher education institutions across Greater Manchester. There is a desire from DFE to be able to have a new hub for an IoT. We're particularly keen to make sure that the geographic location of that hub does two things. One, complements activity that already occurs across the city region, but two, is easily accessible to everybody across the city region. So we'll need to make sure that we look at travel to learn patterns and other characteristics in order to be able to enable people to get into the IoT with high quality satellite centres across the city region. The delivery board has agreed that our sectoral specialisms should particularly focus on digital construction, manufacturing and engineering. So I think they'll be really complementary to some of our key strengths across the city region. And especially as we know, and we'll talk about this in the next paper around digital, that 20% of our digital businesses have been turning away work due to a lack of staff in 2016. So it's particularly important that we get that right. So what we're asking the CA for today is to proceed with the first phase of the application, which if successful then we'll move to a round 2 submission, which will be a detailed application which will be brought back to the CA for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sean. Councillor Brenda Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly welcome this initiative and look forward to a hub being placed somewhere in the Greater Manchester area. My concern actually at the moment, though, is that the stage 1 of this application, to me, is quite vague, and I realise it is only providing an outline proposal, but I really do need it to give me the confidence that we will have the opportunity to influence some of the important detail going forward, so that we're not literally agreeing something without knowing what it is. We need the confidence, for example, that the site that is finally looked at, for this hub, wherever that may be, is something that we will have the ability to influence and not simply be told, well, under delegation powers, we have made this decision. Because I think it is important that we consider all of the factors across Greater Manchester. For example, in Tameside alone, I know that we have a huge skills gap in level 4, and the location of a hub within my locality would be very, very welcome. And it is a fact that whilst some people are able and willing to travel into central Manchester, not everyone is able or willing to travel into central Manchester to actually access this kind of training and education. And so I think we should have something that's out in the localities rather than just another part of central Manchester, so to speak. But as I say, what I'm really asking for is that before a decision on any site is made, that we do have the opportunity to influence that decision rather than it simply be made on a delegated power basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Maybe ask Sean to come back on that point if there's no other comments. Sean?
So I think there's some really valid points, and so the short answer to the question is yes, of course, that's going to be the case. What I'd add, though, is that this is not just about, as important as it is, it's not just about the location of a hub, but more about the principles around learning at level 4 and 5 around the curriculum that's going to be set out around in the IoT for everybody in Greater Manchester. So there is a requirement on us to be able to have a cross-sector sort of business-led partnership with the full support of the LEP. It needs to unite all 10 of the Greater Manchester GFE colleges, so including Tameside College, who will be integral to be able to feeding in their views as well, because I think, of course, it's important, and I'm very happy to have a discussion about where the location is. Equally as important is making sure that regardless of location, that everybody in Greater Manchester is able to benefit from the enhanced skills provision that an IoT will bring, and hopefully that will give the assurance that you were seeking.
Just to pick up Councillor Warrington's concerns, I think I'm right in saying that what the CA has been asked to consider today is delegation for the stage 1 application, which is a high-level expression of interest to the government. The DFE are expecting to fund 10 to 15 institutes of this kind across the country, and I hope I speak for you all in saying that we would want Greater Manchester to be one of that number, and obviously one of the most ambitious, as always. However, the important issues that Councillor Warrington raises could then be taken up as part of the stage 2 process, and the commitment I would want to give you today is that detail will be brought back to this CA so that there's a sign-off of the final shape of any bid. I think, as Councillor Anstey said, this is around satellite centres, so that we do recognise that it is difficult. The cost of transport we all know, particularly for young people, and it can be difficult for people to travel into the city centre. So therefore, this model is based around more locality-based learning, working in a network across Greater Manchester with colleges as partners. But I think that detail needs to be sort of looked at, and I give that commitment today. just a final couple of points from me. We are, of course, being asked by the government to sign up to develop a local industrial strategy. It seems to me to be self-evident that you cannot have a credible local industrial strategy if you've not also got a credible skills strategy to sit alongside it. Earlier this week, I was at a meeting in Birmingham with the Metro Mayor of the West Midlands and from Liverpool City region, Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and the West of England, where regardless of our party affiliations, we all said exactly the same thing to the government, that the lack of progress on skills devolution is of great concern to us all. We cannot be in this position where the government on the one hand is saying there's no bandwidth at the national level for anything other than Brexit, and then also then refusing to pass down that responsibility to make progress on an issue as important as skills to devolved areas, because that means we're not being freed up to face the challenges that are about to come from Brexit. So I think the government's position is unsustainable on skills devolution at the moment. All of the mayors said the same to them, and we believe in endorsing, I think, this approach that's put forward today, it has to come with a change of heart from the Department for Education about skills devolution. I think we all know they've been institutionally resistant to it to this point, but I don't think that can continue. And it's not just my view; it's the shared view of all of the mayors elected last year. So I think in progressing this application, I think it should be in the context of a demand from this combined authority that we are given much greater control over all aspects of skills post-16, not just adult skills, which, as we know, has been delayed till next April, but all post-16. And also, we have an urgent look at the operation of the apprenticeship levy, which isn't leading to the new starts that we need to see across our city region. So I would want to thank Sean for the work that he's done on this, and of course Teresa Grant, the lead on employment and skills. I think we are endorsing today the request, the delegation to develop the stage 1 application. We do pick up Councillor Warrington's concerns, but I think we also pitch this within a much bigger narrative from Greater Manchester, which says the time has come, you know, for full devolution of post-16 skills. The reality of the matter is, and this is under governments of all colours, they have never taken technical education seriously at a national level. They've always treated it as a second-class service. That has given us a problem where we have a skills deficit in parts of our country. And I think the case for the status quo, for carrying on doing what they have been doing, has been lost, and it's now the time for a new approach, and that new approach should come through devolution. And I think our bid should go with that narrative behind it as well. No further points on that. Can I thank Sean for an excellent presentation, and invite him to take item 12, which is the digital strategy.
So thank you very much, Andy. I think, well, in many respects, these two items are linked, so it's particularly helpful to make sure that as we talk about a digital city region, that we also make sure that our population is technically able to benefit from the growth in a digital city region over the coming months and years. Obviously, this is something that is a priority of yours, and over last year, there were a number of digital summits that were held to be able to, one, sort of listen to what providers in this ecosystem were saying to us, but also then to really start saying, well, if you want to do something quite differently about digital, we've got to not just talk about it, but actually do something at the same time. And so what the strategy sort of sets out is why Greater Manchester needs to become a leading digital city region, our vision for that, how we're going to differentiate ourselves from what is effectively a priority of every major city, which is to have improved digital infrastructure and skills. So what's the difference that we want here in Greater Manchester? Some of the targets and measures that we're seeking to apply. There's still a lot of work to do around targets and measures, because there is some further work that's required around actually how do you get tangible outcomes that are measurable and will demonstrably show that we're making progress against the plan. There are some challenges that are set out sort of in the report, but we have a view that if we get this right, then not only will we be improving sort of infrastructure, inclusion, skills and talent, but we'll be increasing the productivity of Greater Manchester at the same time. And so there's a number of practical steps that have been taken over recent weeks. Most notably is our bid to the DCMS full fibre to the premises fund. It's not just about where that goes, but coverage across Greater Manchester so that we can ensure that all parts of the city region are benefiting from improved infrastructure. There's the 5G conversation that we're having at the same time. So I think we need to approach the implementation of the strategy now similar to the conversation that we've just had on an age-friendly city region around actually implementing it and getting the resources needed to be able to do that. The 7 sort of core indicators that are set out in the strategy for today around growth and productivity, around digital skills, inclusion, basic digital skills. And when we talk about basic digital skills, we're talking about things like, you know, can you send an email? Can you create? Can you use the internet to log on? So it's particularly important that we get those skills, but then also we look at those higher level skills, so referenced earlier on in relation to businesses turning away work because we don't have those skills, but also building on individual strengths that exist across Greater Manchester. So, for example, the Sharp project, Siemens, the Northern Robotics Network, key locations for us at Media City UK and elsewhere. So there's huge opportunities for us to be able to really demonstrate that we're not just talking about what a digital city region would mean, but then practically doing something about it as well. And so really pleased to be able to bring this to the CA and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. I think it's an excellent vision and document. And I would want to just put on record my thanks to all of those who've participated in the steering groups. There have been a number of steering groups supporting this work and the 2 digital summits that have been held. And this strategy that's coming before the CA today really has been, as we say, co-produced in that spirit that we've spoken of, that we're not just going to dump policies on people, we're going to write policies with people. So this has been written with people, industry across Greater Manchester, and I think because of that is much stronger as a result and will have a much higher degree of ownership. One thing I would want to pull out in the document is that vision being a digital city with a difference. I think this is not just about infrastructure and the economy. This is about saying that we want to be a connected city region in every sense, connecting people to each other, connecting people to opportunity, and that's what I think is so compelling about the vision that's been put forward. It's a major part of Greater Manchester's story going forward from here. We have the ambition of being the UK's leading digital city region. We already, I think, can show major progress in this area, thanks to the work of the CA, Manchester City Council and others. But this document will take us, I hope, to the next level. And I'd just like to commend you, Sean, for all the work that you've done, Richard Farnell before you, and others who've helped bring this through. Would any colleagues like to come in on any aspect of the document? Alex Ganotis.
Thank you. Sean correctly mentioned the word coverage, and I think it's important that we emphasise that in this discussion. It is implied in the document, but I think we need to make clear that this plan includes the issue of coverage. For example, Measure 6 talks about a focus on average mobile and broadband speeds, but equally, if not more important, are tackling the remaining not spots and also slow spots across Greater Manchester. So I think it's really important to emphasise that that is very much part of this plan, as well as increasing speeds.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, Lib.
Yes, thank you. One of the things, I think it's a great report, and it's a really good ambition for us to become a digital region. And I know there's quite a lot of work going on in schools, but it's still quite patchy. And I know in Tameside we have a lot of activities like coding clubs, and we've recently held a hack, which this last week, and we had 40 young people and a queue of more than that who wanted to engage in the hack. And they're working with Brother and Purple and Raspberry Pi and all these names that, you know, are in the world of technology to help develop solutions for the future based on challenges that they're set. And so these kind of things are vital, but I want to go on to say that without having this kind of education, without having these opportunities in school and it being part of the mainstream curriculum to do to have that opportunity to be able to pick up on digital creativity in a way, we can't take this plan forward. We can deal with what we're dealing with now and with adults and people coming on stream, but that's not going to be enough for the future, because we all see that the future and it's in some ways it's an open to the sky. I would say an open book, but it's more than a book. How this is going to develop and the uses and the work opportunities that are going to come and be created through the digital world. So for us, this is a great ambition. It's a foundation for the future, for jobs and apprenticeships and work. But we've got to start at the beginning and get our children and young people prepared to take on the challenge as well.
Fully agree. Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come in? Paul Dennett.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this strategy. I think it's a fantastic piece of work. I especially like Section 5, which talks about playing to our strengths, and there's a whole list of different organisations and institutions, some affiliated to HE organisations within Greater Manchester in terms of what we're doing within this space. I just wanted to say that obviously government's already told us that they want to work with us in terms of implementing the National Industrial Strategy within the city region. And I think what's going to be absolutely critical to that is garnering a real detailed understanding of what's going on within various industries and sectors that we consider to have industrial and sectoral strengths in across Greater Manchester. I know certainly in Section 5 in the report it gives you an idea of what industries these organisations or institutions sit in, but I think we need to go one step further and start talking to those businesses, those organisations, those sectors about what is the changing nature of skills within their industry and how can we align ourselves as a system so the link between educational institutions and the employers in those industries and those sectors is going to be absolutely critical if we're going to adequately respond to the skills issue in terms of the vision that's articulated here. But it's quite clear to me we have significant strengths here within the city region. We should garner a more detailed understanding from a skills perspective and start aligning our educational system to that to ensure that we create those high-paid, highly skilled jobs of the future that we can start trading globally in a fairly competitive global economy at the moment.
Thank you very much, Paul. Anybody else want to come in? If not, would Sean like to respond to the points raised?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'll only be brief. I mean, just to agree with Alex's comments around coverage, as we work through the implementation of the measures, if we can get smarter measures that will measure some of the things more accurately to be able to do that, then that absolutely will be the case. And it doesn't take away from the principle of coverage, but also we want to be able to demonstrably show that we're measuring it as well. It's interesting, there's very few metrics that are commonly applied either at a local, sub-regional, national or international perspective in relation to digital infrastructure or performance. So I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to lead on that particular point in future. And then the 2 points around schools. It is the case, I think, that the new Secretary of State for Education very clearly views coding as a language that people should be learning in schools. I think that's a very welcome view that DFE, we should be able to work with DFE to be able to say, look, in order to be able to have a more strategic relationship with you, not just about post-16 skills, but digital skills at the same time from a young age, you know, this plan is the basis on which we want to be able to have that discussion with you. And I think that also from Paul's perspective, will sit very comfortably around ensuring that not only do we have the population that is skilled from a digital perspective, but we also have the right, we need to skill our teachers to skill up people to be able to benefit from new infrastructure, so, from new skills at the same time. I think the final thing I'd say is that I think the strategy really helps us to, should inform not just skills, but also how we plan for growth. So there'll be responsibility on all of us as we identify where our new employment locations are going to be in future, that if we really want to have a long-term discussion about where new infrastructure goes, we need to be really certain about how we plan for growth in future. And I think there'll be a lot of crossover between different activities that the CA is undertaking at the moment. But if we really want to make it happen, we can do, and it'll be really exciting for Greater Manchester if we get it right.
Thank you very much indeed, Sean, and again, thank you for the work you've done on this. I think this is a very exciting strategy. I think it does put us ahead of the rest. To answer Alex's point around coverage, it is about all of us pulling together to win the bid that we put in to the DCMS and making a very strong case behind that. I think it is dependent on the 10 districts also adding their usage to any case for expansion of full fibre. But if we can do this as one GM, if we can then succeed with the bid, then I think we can address the issues of coverage and make sure that this is a plan to give that good coverage to all parts of Greater Manchester. So I would want to reassure you, Alex, on that. And on the points around skills, particularly the points that Paul Dennett made, I hear from digital businesses a lot that they can't, the pipeline is not delivering people to well-paid jobs. We're talking jobs £30,000, £40,000 a year. So as much as there is really good work going on in our schools, particularly our primary schools who are teaching coding, when kids get to secondary school, it seems that they're pulled away in a different direction, and we've got a slightly more backward-looking curriculum, and we need to do something about that. It's why I'm going to bring to you soon a detailed proposal for our UCAS-style system for apprenticeships. I want all young people in Greater Manchester to have a clear line of sight to the opportunities that are available in the modern labour market, particularly in the digital sector. So at secondary school, they can begin to aspire to those opportunities and see what qualifications the employers require them to have, so that they then can get them. And that, I think, will sort of correct this mismatch we've got at the moment, where we've got very well-paid jobs, but the pipeline of skills that doesn't quite deliver people from Greater Manchester to get those opportunities. So there's more work to be done in this space, but this document lays excellent foundations, and we hope that this will be an unfolding story as we go forward from here. We do talk about the need for expansion of Wi-Fi in our towns centres, as well as the city centre, a one login solution for GM. And Sean asked us about the digital skills. Can you turn on a device? I think, can you send an email? I won't ask for a show of hands from the CA today as to whether or not you all have got those basic digital skills. But there is a lot of work going into this. I don't know if people have seen the Google Digital Garage in the Manchester City Centre, which is a free resource for any GM citizen to use. We launched Digital Salford not long ago, which is laying great emphasis on bringing people up to date with those basic digital skills, because the truth of the matter is life is taking place now in the digital space. That's where the conversations are happening, and if people haven't got those skills, then they are going to suffer from that loneliness and isolation that Peter Smith spoke of before. So this is where this all comes together, and where this strategy supports our ambitions on ageing well as well. So can I ask the CA that if points have been taken on board, that we agree this strategy? Thank you very much. Item 13, Gmca revenue update. This is a report which updates colleagues on the year end, the projected position as we come towards year end. There's separate items that colleagues are being asked to note and approve. Firstly, to note the Economic Development and Regeneration budget adjustments as detailed. Secondly, that the use of business rates top-up grant be transferred to reserves to fund the local growth fund revenue commitments in 2018-19. Those commitments have already been agreed by the CA, and this is a practical switch of resources to make sure that those commitments can be met. And that also has consequences for the switch in LGF capital grant to fund elements of the overall transport capital programme. To note the Economic Development and Regeneration revenue outturn position for 2017-18, which shows an underspend of 0.663 million after budget. To note the transport revenue outturn position, which is in line with budget after transfers to earmarked reserves as detailed in section 3. And to note the Transport for Greater Manchester outturn position for 2017-18, which is in line with budget. There is the question of an underspend, a really relatively modest underspend, but I am very pleased to report to the CA that one of the reasons for that was underspending on the costs of the mayoral election to the tune of some £250,000. So that's obviously such a smooth running and I would say successful outcome. That would be a bit unfair on other candidates, but the costs of the mayoral election were not as originally projected, and that has led in large part to the underspend which we're reporting to you today. Any colleague like to come in? Councillor Alan Brett.
Underspend, because all councils do it, and I see that you've transferred it to reserves, so that will obviously next year make the position even better for us when we're setting up the precept. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Helpful prompt on the record. I think, as I've said before, the CA is in a transitional year where we are reviewing all the various lines, service lines within the CA. We will subject ourselves to the same strictures and constraints that obviously all 10 districts are under, and we will seek to provide as much transparency as we possibly can about the financial position as it unfolds, and we take on board the point that was just made. So with that, could I ask colleagues to note the points and approve the switch as recommended? Thank you very much. Item 14, these are interim nominations for Greater Manchester European Structural Investment Funds and the Sustainable Urban Development Subcommittee. These will be interim arrangements until the formal GMCA nomination decisions, which will come up at the AGM in June. So in that regard, we're asking the CA to agree the proposal to retain the existing GMCA nominees for the low carbon portfolio, Councillor Ganotis, the Equality, Fairness, Inclusion portfolio, Jean Stretton, and Councillor Sue Murphy, the GMCA portfolio lead on Business and Economy's nomination, that they remain unchanged. Secondly, to agree the nomination relating to the GMCA investment portfolio is held vacant until the formal GMCA nomination process to be made at the GMCA AGM in June. That's, of course, resulting from the sad passing of Councillor Kieran Quinn. Thirdly, to agree that Councillor Sue Murphy be put forward as interim chair of the GMESIF SUD committee until the June AGM. I hope these are relatively routine decisions for the CA, and I'd be grateful if colleagues could give them their agreement. Thank you very much. Item 15, Skills Capital Grants, Sean Anstey.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the Skills Capital programme between 2017 and 2020 allocates funding for us to be able to improve the capital estate of many of our further education institutions across the city region. This particular report focuses on the Trafford and Stockport Campus Skills Project, £16 million funding application from both colleges who are merging as a result of the area-based review. The programme was launched in September 2017 and expression of interest was received from both colleges, and the full business case was received on the 20th of December 2017. GMCA officials then spent probably Christmas and the early weeks of January appraising that submission and required further information, and that was received on the 13th of February 2018. There's a particular need for us to be able to progress this application today because both colleges are due to merge at the end of March, and earlier on this week the Funding Committee and External Advisory Panel of Treasury and DFE approved, subject to our approval today of the Skills Capital funding, the restructure fund application that's also been made to be able to support the merger. So there's a Part B report, so that's all I need to say in relation to this at the moment, and I hope the recommendations can be agreed.
Thank you, Sean. And this, of course, is one of the things that arises from the area-based review of a couple of years ago. So colleagues will be familiar with the background that has led to this proposal. I should have said at the beginning that there are further details set out in the Part B report, but I'm assuming that colleagues, unless colleagues want to raise issues under Part B, that we take all of this under this item. If so, let's proceed. And Councillor Ganotis.
Thank you. Unsurprisingly, I'm fully supportive of this. This is a great development. It really will facilitate the merger of the two colleges and, from my perspective, bring around huge improvements to the campus at Stockport and also the offer of that college. I particularly want to thank officers across Stockport's Trafford councils and the Combined Authority for all the intense work they have done on this over the past few months. We've got into tricky situations. It's required a lot of work and a lot of amendments, but to get to where we are is a tribute to all the work that they've been putting in. A lot of work has also been achieved through a strong partnership between Trafford College and Stockport Council on this, and I want to pay particular tribute and give particular thanks to Gemma Marsh and the Combined Authority, Teresa Grant, and also Sean Anstey for their support on this. They have been pushing and pulling a great deal behind the scenes on this for the past few months, and I don't want it to be underestimated as to the amount of work that they and colleagues have put into bringing this to where we are today. So this is a great opportunity for both Stockport and Trafford colleges. It's a really good outcome from the area-based review, which, as you'll recall from previous discussions on that review in these meetings, have been controversial in terms of some of how the implementation is supposed to operate and some of the outcomes there. But this is a fantastic outcome, and thank you to all concerned.
Well, thank you very much for that enthusiastic endorsement of the recommendation, but unsurprising given it's very, very significant news for Stockport and will lead to a significant enhancement of provision should it be approved. Any other colleagues want to come in on this point? If not, can I too thank Sean and Teresa Grant for their work on this. It's a very significant grant, but a much needed one to achieve all of those aims we were talking about a moment ago around enhancing the quality of skills provision across Greater Manchester. And I'm asking that the Combined Authority agree to the proposal and delegate authority subject to due diligence. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That concludes the business for this meeting of the Combined Authority. Thank you, all colleagues, for your attendance today, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.